It began as an internet video series detailing the history of video games and quickly became a leading voice in quality documentary programming for the gaming community. What set itself apart from any other voices on gaming history is the complete context that the series provided for each installment. Viewers were not only impressed by the attention to the marketing, production, and reception of each franchise, but nearly all fans enjoyed the writing and the sometimes comedic delivery of the show's host. This blend of deliberate documentation and editorial lightheartedness made the series a sensation in the niche audience that watched every week. However, when the show decided to take a turn for a new format, featuring a new host, fans complained in droves that the show had taken a turn for the worst. The new iteration has been cited by fans as being a dumbed-down, more commercial, and less informative program than its predecessor. Also, fans have scoffed at the new host, Chris Lockey, as lacking both enthusiasm and a vocal presence for a show based so much on monologue. Whether the series will heed the complaints of its fans or continue in their current fashion, one thing is for certain: all their history and future belongs to them. Huh? Historically, gaming has always been brushed aside by other entertainment mediums, but has always maintained a presence in the mediums themselves. For instance, literature, art, music, and performance art have always been, and always will be, the ideal expression of a culture. But within those art forms, gaming has always been a part of, rather than apart from. In Homer's classic epic poem, the Iliad, the Greeks celebrate their victory over the Trojans with a series of Olympic Games, thus creating the Olympics. Chess is regularly seen as an essential game that can train the mind to think analytically. It is often used in films, books, and poetry as an allegory for life and, more notably, war. However, when games crept into the motion picture genre through computers and gaming devices, critics dismissed these as being simply toys for children. Later, as games became more violent, they were criticized as being a corrupted influence on the youth of America. Interestingly enough, all other entertainment mediums fell victim to these same claims, including television, which for the last 20 years has gradually become an art form in its own right, making the home entertainment industry a larger market now than it ever has been before, to the point where it is now competing with Hollywood blockbusters. In recent years, video games too have become a major competitor in the global entertainment market. Games, however, have had little to no representation in a biographical context. Lovers of music are often entranced by musicians and artists, while the world over views actors and actresses as ideals of beauty among people. These entertainers have always had people interested in how they made it from their humble beginnings to their current success. On the other hand, few gamers share the same desire for game developers as with individuals like Marilyn Monroe or Kurt Cobain. Suffice it to say, I have never seen a poster on anyone's wall with the game developer Gabe Newell of Valve Software or Shigeru Miyamoto. Game developers are an odd breed, a mix between rockstar, computer nerd, painter, and storyteller with varying amounts of each. The fans of these individuals are a few part of a very niche audience. Therefore, television programs like Behind the Music or Inside the Actor's Studio for gaming and game developers have been non-existent until a cable channel called G4 came on the air. Launched on April 24th, 2002, G4 was focused on gaming and gaming only. Their featured original content included a news show based solely around gaming, as well as competitive gaming shows such as Arena and Game On. In addition, they had a show that focused on the history of gaming called Icons. Icons told the story of games and game developers, first airing in May of 2002. It was the first time gaming had a consistent voice for the backstory of the games many knew and loved. For 30 minutes, viewers were told on how games like Zelda and Tetris became household names, along with their conception and controversy that surrounded them. Tetris, in particular, has a very interesting history that involves the KGB and other licensing nightmares. These truly enlightening stories were made accessible and, more importantly, entertaining through the delivery of the Icons TV series. Unfortunately for the fans of the series, and for viewers of the G4 network, Icons were skewed from its original intended content. Rather than basing an episode on Mario or Atari as was done in the past, they started featuring somewhat prominent male figures like J.J. Abrams and Seth Green. Notably, the show chose male icons because in 2006, the entire G4 network had a drastic change in style and programming. The former president of the company was replaced by a gentleman named Neil Tiles, which for clarification purposes is not a kitchen countertop and isn't available at Home Depot. Having had experience working at ESPN, Tiles sought to broaden the station's audience by catering towards an ideal male viewer. One that would evidently be filled with testosterone, roid rage, and Viagra. G4 traded their game-centric programs for new ridiculous shows like It's Effing Science, the International Sexy Ladies Show, and Hurl, a show about competitive eating. In the network's desire to become more mainstream, it has now become a parody of another male-centric network, Spike TV. Later this year, the G4 network will again drastically change their programming as the channel is scheduled to be rebranded as the Esquire Network. Thus, G4 has gone from gaming network to males-only network to what will soon be considered a metrosexual males-only network. For a while, there were no other shows dedicated to the history of gaming until Machinima.com began its series All Your History Belongs to Us in 2009. The show's writer, Nick Warner, grabbed the attention of the company with his own machinima he crafted using Assassin's Creed. According to Warner's LinkedIn page, one of his goals is to participate in the web's movement towards higher quality narrative content. Lucky for us, All Your History did just that. Taking what G4's Icons did and expanding upon it, All Your History became a benchmark for delivering the backstories to video games and the creators behind them. Free from the demands of a television network, the show could extend a topic into 4 or often 5 different parts in order to fully illustrate a game in all its facets. Also, the show took time to establish the context that existed around the games and their creators. Taking up more than just development and reception, the show sought to ask questions about the nature of gaming on a social, financial, and global level. Here's a case in point. The Dota episodes offered viewers something closer to a scholarly article about social interaction and cutting-edge business practices than simply a show about a game mod. In these episodes, narrator Rob Talbot invited viewers to question the categorical conundrum that is Dota, while outlining the gaming industry's attempt to recreate that same magic. Socially, a game that was developed, created, and then recreated all by and through the public is astounding. And All Your History presented this information with a charm and a clarity that had become synonymous with the series. With the combination of Warner's clever writing and Talbot's exacting delivery, the show garnered over 1 million views on YouTube. There were also certain aspects of the show that made it feel iconic and definitely attracted me to the series. Maybe it was the rocking intro theme, or the reliable elevator music playing in the background throughout every episode, or even the use of certain phrases like the cleverly titled such and such, part 2. The show was brilliant, and it didn't stop there. The show was kept relevant with an annual episode dedicated to a recap of all the big news in gaming that year, In addition, they had installments that featured major landmarks in the gaming world, such as the creation of E3, the mid-80s gaming crash, and an extended look at one of the largest names in gaming, Nintendo. This tipping of the hat to Nintendo was also a bowing out for both narrator Rob Talbot and writer Nick Warner. At the end of the show's 4th season, although both gentlemen would be carrying on with other work, only one individual will be taking both of their places. That man is Chris Lockey. At the very start of the 5th season, viewers were appalled by the changes made to the show, especially for the new host. The YouTube comments exploded with harsh criticism for Lockey, all ranging around his apparent lack of enthusiasm to his overall mediocre vocal presence. Lockey's delivery, although very enunciated, has a higher pitch, less body, and a weaker presence in comparison to the show's previous host. The change in the background music didn't help much either. The show chose to drop the previous elevator music, which was a staple of the series, and opted to instead play music from the featured game underneath the poor narration. In retrospect, the reliable elevator bass and beats gave Talbot a foundation to craft his narration over it, filling out the sound frequency. This new addition, although promoting the featured game's soundtrack, caused the focus to shift from storytelling to a mishmash of sound that feels jarring and at some points makes it hard to understand what's being said. I want to point out that the decision to play music from the featured game outlines the major issues with the series' change in content as well. Simply, it is the attitude of promotion rather than documentation that has left most fans feeling like Machinima has abandoned them. The first video for the new season broke away from the tradition of delving into the context, conception, and reception of the game, and instead focused more on the game details like game mechanics and graphics. The Devil May Cry episodes also felt rushed and more commercial, attempting to fit 3 games in one episode. The result is what feels like a long commercial for why everyone should buy the new iteration of DMC. Previously, the show had nailed the juggle of content versus pacing, but for some reason in this new iteration of the show, they chose to shoot for aspirations far below what the series is capable of, and even offered less relevant information than the G4 series icons. What strikes me the most is how the show and Machinima seem to embrace this lack of quality. This embrace is heard every time Chris Lockey states, "Join me, your host, Chris Lockey." The effect of this statement is a request to join Lockey in another poor replacement for what the show was. And because it's said at the start of every show, it feels like pride for the series' poor writing and vision. It's as if he's saying, "Join me for dinner in a trash can," and expecting the viewers to be grateful for the invitation. Never in the show beforehand did the narrator nor did the writer acknowledge themselves, unless it was the humble thanks from Nick Warner for all the praise of the show. From the new intro to the weak content, the good old days of All Your History is beginning to look like, well, history. Going from having admiration and the great respect of its fans to being heavily criticized by those same fans, All Your History still continues on. It is unclear whether or not Machinima or Warner will revert back to the original format anytime soon. The most recent episode features aliens, and it's important to note that the new Aliens game was released this month. Again, it's evident that the show has now become a platform for promoting new games, rather than revealing the history of the iconic games that we all know and love. Fans continue to comment requesting that they reinstate the old narrator and the old format. Obviously, questions still remain. Will All Your History look back at its own space in history? Will the series follow in the footsteps of the G4 network and change to become more commercially viable for their advertisers? If anything, I hope that this short survey in the presence of gaming and culture encourages others to look at the important impact that gaming has on art and society. Video games are a new medium for storytelling, And there are people out there who want to know more about these storytellers. Whether it's a desire to relive nostalgic days of playing in the arcade of memories, or an intimate view of financial and technological changes to come, there will always be an audience for the documentation of video games. And I found this to be true for a number of different reasons, but the most outstanding fact is that gaming is embedded in our culture. It is a part of the foundation that we live on every day. And even though some may argue that it's a very small portion of the foundation that we live on, these are still stories worth being told. So stay tuned for other stories, and in the meantime, check me out. I'm Josh Drew. Thanks for watching.